The wind howled like hungry ghosts from the western mountains, swirling dust and straw in the farmyard. The leaden sky was streaked with lightning, the lightning streaking across the sky and then disappearing, leaving behind a booming thunder like cannon fire. Above, the roof of the old stable creaked, each wooden beam shaking as if about to fall out of place. Elena Hartfield pulled her shawl tightly around her, her hands shaking as she rushed toward the stable. "Silas, where are you?" Her voice was hoarse in the wind and rain. Her 6-year-old son had just run in to get the rope to tie the horse when the storm struck. Now his small figure disappeared in the tangled hay. Boone, the youngest, cried out on the porch, and Lark, the eldest, clung to her mother's hand, screaming, "Mama, don't go in there! The roof is about to collapse." But the mother's heart did not hesitate. Elena pushed her daughter's hand away, jumped over the broken fence, and rushed straight into the chaos. The smell of damp hay, rotten wood, and rusty iron mixed with the rain. In a flash of lightning, she saw Silas crouched under a fallen manger, his hands covering his head, his eyes wide open in panic. "Silas!" Elena rushed forward, knelt down and hugged her son tightly. At that moment, a terrible cracking sound rang out above. The crossbeam, as big as a human body, slid from its anchor and fell like a slash. She barely had time to turn around and cover her son. Bam! The shockwaves stunned Elena, but instead of sharp pain, she only felt a solid mass pressing against her. A familiar, deep, hoarse voice rang out right next to her ear. "Bow your head. Hold your son tight." It was Daniel McGraw. He appeared like a giant black shadow, rushing forward to shield them at the last second. The beam hit his shoulder, pinning him to the mud. Elena saw blood flowing down his rough shirt, each drop of crimson mixed with the rain. You're hurt," Elena cried out, her voice breaking. Daniel gritted his teeth, his blue-gray eyes flashing in the darkness. "It's okay. I have to pull you out first." With his free hand, he pushed the straw and rotten wood aside, making a gap for Silas to crawl out. Elena hugged him tightly, pushing him towards the barn door where Lark was crying. But before she could stand up, another thunderclap shook the barn roof. Daniel pushed Elena close to his chest, his broad shoulders like a wall. "Go! No! What about you?" Elena shouted through the wind and rain, her eyes filled with tears. He just curled his lips slightly, a hard but warm smile. "I've stood firm for years. A little storm is nothing. Go." She bit her lip, but her heart wouldn't listen. Instead of running away, Elena struggled to lift the wooden beam with him. Her small hands trembled and overlapped Daniel's calloused ones. His warmth passed through, despite the cold rain. They both exerted their strength, groaning, and finally the block rolled aside. The whole stable was about to collapse, but they managed to get out. Elena fell face down on the ground, Daniel kneeling beside her, one hand holding his bleeding shoulder. Silas ran towards her, the 3 children hugging each other, crying. Elena looked up, her blue eyes filled with tears at the rancher. He sat there, panting, his chest heaving, his wet hair sticking to his face. Rain glistened on his tanned skin and blood ran down his neck. She reached out, touched the wound on his shoulder. Daniel jerked but did not push it away, his eyes fixed on her, silent and burning. "You could have died in there," Elena whispered, her voice trembling but full of emotion. Daniel tilted his head slightly, his warm breath mingling with the smell of rain and wood smoke. "But I didn't die, because I couldn't let your son die." The words made Elena's chest tighten. She didn't know if it was the fear she had just felt, or the gentle strength radiating from him. For a moment, the world outside, the storm, the thunder, the frightened horses, all vanished. There was only their ragged breathing, their eyes clashing, and a dangerous yet warm feeling creeping into her heart. Elena suddenly realized, from the moment Daniel rushed forward, she no longer saw him as a stranger. He had become the only wall between her and the unbearable loss. The storm continued to rage, but in the middle of the camp yard, under the pouring rain, 2 people touched hands in blood and tears. It was not a lover's handshake, but something stronger. The handshake of survival, of an unspoken promise. The storm passed, leaving the smell of wood smoke and mud in the air. The next morning, the sun shone faintly over the valley, illuminating the muddy yard. The stables had collapsed, the timbers lying scattered. But strangely, in that devastated space, Elena Hartfield felt more at peace than ever, because her son was alive, and Daniel McGraw had become the wall between her and the abyss of loss. Elena sat on the porch, mending Silas's torn shirt. The three children dozed side by side on a pile of thick blankets. Daniel stood near the fence, his shoulders roughly wrapped in bandages, staring silently at the distant mountains. He spoke little, but his presence filled the void. She knew it was time to tell the truth. Elena Hartfield was born in Ozark, Arkansas. Her father died in a mine explosion when she was 10. Her mother, frail and a washerwoman, had chapped hands all winter. Elena grew up poor, but she was beautiful, a gentle beauty with green eyes and dark copper-gold hair. At 16, she fell in love with Jonas Hartfield, a gentle farm boy who promised to protect her for life. They married when Elena was 18 and soon had 3 children. But happiness was short-lived. Border warfare broke out, and Jonas was drafted into a bloody conflict. She waited, prayed, until a soldier knocked on the door, handed over a torn leather belt, and said Jonas fell in a gunfight near El Paso. Elena collapsed. She was rejected by her husband's family, who thought she was the one who had killed Jonas. Their 3 children suddenly became a burden to them. With nowhere else to go, she took her children and lived off any kind of work. Washing clothes, cooking, even cleaning in bars where men looked at her with dirty eyes. Everything went downhill when a fire burned down the small rented room they shared. Elena only had time to run out with her 3 children, empty-handed. In those shabby days, she saw a notice hanging on a wooden post in front of the grocery store in Roswell. Cook wanted for McGraw Farm. Room and board provided, must be able to work and keep quiet. It was not a sweet invitation, but a blunt command, but for Elena it was like a lifeline. She remembered that afternoon. The sun was hot, dust was rising from the wagon wheels. 3 children followed. Their luggage was only a torn cloth suitcase. In front of her was Daniel McGraw's wooden house, quiet and closed like its owner. Daniel stepped out onto the porch, his tall figure, his cold steel eyes staring straight ahead. He was silent, as if he wanted to gauge whether she would dare to take another step. Elena swallowed, then raised her head. "You posted the notice. I can cook, I can work, but I have 3 children. They are good. They listen. I have nowhere else to go." Daniel was silent for a long time. There was only the sound of the dry wind and Elena's pounding heart. Finally, he nodded slightly. 3 days. I'll see if you can hold out here. No promises, no questions. But just like that, Elena felt a crack open in the desert of despair. Now, after the storm of the night before, Daniel stepped onto the porch and sat down on the wooden chair. He didn't look at her, just asked, "Have you ever thought about staying longer than 3 days?" Elena froze, her needle stopping in midair. Her heart skipped a beat. "If you'll let me," she replied, her voice low but firm. "I'll stay. I'll cook, clean, raise the children, and care for this camp as if it were my own." Daniel turned his head, his blue-gray eyes worn by years of solitude. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Okay, but remember, it's not easy here, and I can't stand liars." Elena took a deep breath. She knew she had just signed a contract without papers, without a wedding ring. A new beginning, but a challenging one. In that moment, Elena looked over at her 3 sleeping children, feeling more secure than ever. As for Daniel, he turned back to the field, clutching the bandage on his shoulder, but in his heart, for the first time in many years, a warm seed had just been sown. In the days after the storm, the McGraw farm gradually returned to its usual harsh rhythm. The sun burned the grasslands, the wind and dust covered the fences, the hammers clanged as Daniel hammered back each broken wooden post. Elena and her children cooked, cleaned, and tended the chickens and ducks. It was as if they had lived here for years, not just weeks. However, outside, the town never missed an opportunity to gossip. At the small grocery store, when Elena went in to buy flour, she heard whispers behind her. The young widow who lived with McGraw, and even brought her child with her. The man who killed the robber in broad daylight? He probably didn't stop at guns. Elena clenched the cloth bag in her hand, blood rushing to her face. She didn't answer, just quietly paid and walked out, but those words haunted her every step. That afternoon, as Daniel was returning from horseback, he came across Elena carrying water from the well. The yellow sunlight bathed her hair, which was covered with sweat and dirt. Despite her fatigue, her posture was still dignified. He wanted to say something, like, "Let me carry it," or "Be careful not to slip," but in the end, he just stood there, staring, his eyes motionless. Elena glanced over too. His gaze was as cold as the night wind, making her want to avoid it and reach out at the same time. A brief moment, then they both turned away, silently continuing their work. That night, Elena cooked bacon stew with potatoes and cornbread. The children ate heartily, while Daniel quietly used his spoon. Finally, he put down his bowl and looked up, saying, "I heard everything the townspeople said." Elena paused, her heart tightening. "And you believe them?" Daniel did not answer immediately. The oil lamp cast a slanted shadow on his tanned face. "I believe what I see, but I also know that rumors sometimes kill faster than bullets." Elena bit her lip, her hands clutching the hem of her dress. She wanted to shout that she was innocent, that she was only looking for shelter for her children, but his calm look made her silent. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Elena sat alone on the porch. The western night was vast, the stars scattered like salt on black velvet. She hugged her arms around her knees, her heart filled with doubt. Was it right to stay here, or was she pushing her child into another round of trouble? The door creaked. Daniel stepped out, his bandaged arm exposed under his rolled-up shirt sleeves. He did not sit next to her, but leaned against the porch pillar, his eyes looking far away. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked in surprise. Elena was startled. "No, it's just... They say I'm cold-blooded. Maybe it's true. I shot a man to death once, right in front of the tavern." He paused, his voice even as if telling an old story. "He tried to steal the horse, pulled out his gun first. I was faster. From then on, they called me the devil in cowboy clothes." Elena looked at his profile, the silver moonlight reflecting off his hard features. In that moment, she saw no demon, only a man with a heavy loneliness. She whispered, "The demon will not risk his life to save my son from the collapsed barn." Daniel turned, his blue-gray eyes catching hers. No words were spoken, but their breaths mingled in the night air. Elena turned away in confusion, her chest churning with strange waves. A few days later, Elena took Lark into town to buy fabric for a shirt. As they passed the tavern, a tall, bearded man blocked their way. He smirked. "A woman like you shouldn't be with a man like McGraw. I heard he betrayed his friends to save his life." Elena squeezed her daughter's hand, intending to walk away, but the man rudely reached out and grabbed her wrist. Lark screamed. At that moment, a strong hand was placed on his shoulder. Daniel appeared from the darkness, his eyes cold. He didn't need to say much, just placed his other hand loosely on the gun at his waist. The air froze. He immediately let go of Elena, stepped back, and stammered. "Just kidding. Didn't mean anything." Daniel just gritted his teeth. "Then talk less." Elena held her breath, her heart pounding. As they left, she clearly heard Lark whisper, "Mama, he protects us." And she herself, though she did not dare admit it, felt her heart less cold. That evening, Elena mended Silas's shirt by the light of an oil lamp. Daniel sat near the fire, quietly sharpening his knife. Neither spoke to the other, but the silence between them was no longer tense. It was a kind of waiting. Elena knew the challenges were still there. The townspeople, the gossip, the ghosts of the past. And Daniel too, could she trust him completely? Fear and hope mingled inside her. But now, as the firelight cast Daniel's shadow on the wall, Elena could not deny it. Her heart was beginning to flutter, even as her mind tried to hold it back. The desert night was quieter than usual. The wind had died down, leaving only the chirping of insects in the cactus. Inside, the fireplace crackled, its light casting flickering shadows on the walls. Elena mended her son's torn shirt, her eyes occasionally glancing at the man sitting opposite. Daniel sat leaning against a wooden chair, his shoulder bandaged, his other arm holding a hunting knife, slowly sharpening it. His calm demeanor filled the room with an indescribable sense of security. Elena told herself to look down and concentrate, but sometimes she caught his gaze on her face. Each time, her heart skipped a beat. When the children were in bed, Elena tidied up, then turned to see Daniel struggling to remove the bandage from his shoulder. The old wound had not healed yet, and blood was seeping out. "You can't just leave it like that," she said, her voice more stern than usual. Daniel was briefly surprised but didn't object when she took the medicine box. Under the oil lamp, Elena sat close by, her white hands trembling slightly as they touched his firm skin. The muscles under her hands were tense and warm. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. "Not half the pain I used to feel," he replied, but his voice was hoarse, not as firm as usual. Elena smiled slightly, concentrating on cleaning the wound. Sometimes her fingers lingered too long, as if afraid that if she let go, he would disappear. Daniel looked down, his eyes deep, silently letting her do it. When she was done, Elena sat still. The distance between them was so close that she could feel his breath on her cheek, the familiar smell of pine and smoke. At that moment, without any words, warmth crept into her chest like an undercurrent. The next morning, the dawn dyed the prairie golden. Elena woke up early, stepped out onto the porch, and saw Daniel standing there, holding a cup of coffee, his eyes looking far away towards the mountains. She coughed softly. He turned around, his eyes met hers, hesitated for a moment, then handed her the cup of coffee. "Drink it, it's still hot." Elena was surprised. This was the first time he had taken the initiative. She took it, her lips touching the rim of the cup where he had just drunk. A wave of heat ran down her spine, making her turn away in confusion. But Daniel remained still, his eyes calm, as if watching to see if she would run away from that moment. That afternoon, a sudden rainstorm fell. The camp was silent, except for the sound of rushing water. Elena was gathering her clothes when Daniel passed by and helped her gather them. The two of them stood together under the awning, the rain pouring down just a few steps away. "All these years, I don't think anyone would be willing to stay here," Daniel said, his voice low and hoarse, drowning out the sound of the rain. Elena looked up, meeting his eyes, shining in the distant lightning. "I have no other place." Daniel was silent for a moment, then shook his head. "No, Elena, you could have gone anywhere, but you chose to stay, and that—" He paused, as if afraid to say too much. Elena felt her heart ache. She wanted to say that yes, she chose to stay, not just for the kitchen or the roof, but for the strange peace he brought. But the words stuck in her throat. Only the exchange of eyes, the rain falling like a veil concealing the secret. That night, Elena prepared a meat stew with herbs, the aroma filling the kitchen. Daniel walked in, looking at the cozy scene, his eyes softening. "It's been a long time since I smelled this," he said softly. Elena looked up, a little surprised. "Do you like it?" Daniel nodded, then unconsciously reached out, taking the large knife from the table for her. When his calloused hand lightly touched hers, they both paused. Time seemed to freeze. Elena quickly withdrew her hand, but the warmth still lingered, making her face flush. Daniel didn't say anything more, just sat quietly at the table. But there was something in his eyes that had never been there before. Softness. In the following days, intimacy did not come from flowery words or gestures, but from small details. Daniel left a bucket of water by the door every morning. Elena deftly added a piece of cake to his meal. The eyes met, not for too long, but long enough to make both their hearts flutter. The children sensed it too. Lark often giggled when Daniel fixed the roof and then secretly handed Elena the hammer, as if they were doing the same job. Silas, who was quiet, began calling Daniel boss, but almost blurted out father a few times. Elena knew she was walking a thin line. One more step and love would turn into fire. But she also knew that in the harsh West, fire could both warm and burn everything. Autumn has arrived. The sky is a dull gray. The wind blows coldly across the vast prairie. Farm McGraw has just experienced the most peaceful days since Elena and the children arrived. The children are used to farming, the kitchen is neat, and Daniel begins to smile more, even if it is just a fleeting smile. Elena feels for the first time in many years this roof can really be home. But then, fate never gives up easily. One afternoon, as the sun was setting behind the mountains, a horseman appeared at the end of the road leading to the camp. His cloak was dusty, his wide-brimmed hat covering half his face. When he stopped on the porch, Elena and Lark were hanging laundry. She stopped. Her heart pounded as she recognized the ironic smile on the familiar face. Elena Hartfield, her ex-husband Jonas's brother. Elena, his voice hissed, half mocking, half venomous. I thought you had burned to death in a fire. To think you'd be living comfortably here with a cold-blooded cowboy. Elena clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. Evan? You? Why are you here? He jumped off his horse and stepped closer, his eyes narrowing like a predator's. I've come to reclaim what was ours. You were never really a widow. Jonas didn't die, just disappeared. No death certificate, no body, nothing. So you're living a life of sin with this man. With that, he nodded toward the cage where Daniel had just stepped out. Rumors spread like wildfire. Within days, the whole town was whispering. She said her husband was dead, but there was no proof. A fake widow. She brought her child to trick McGraw. Not only that, she lived with him like a married couple. Elena walked into the market, surrounded by contemptuous eyes. Women turned their backs and whispered to each other. Children were pushed down by their friends and called bastards. That night, Elena sat alone on the porch, her hands covering her face. Tears fell down her messy hair. Daniel came out and sat down next to her. He didn't speak, just took a handkerchief out of his pocket and placed it gently on her knee. You? Do you believe me? She choked. Daniel was silent for a long time, his deep eyes staring into the darkness. I want to believe. That answer was like a knife piercing Elena's chest. She understood. His silence was the greatest distance. On Sunday, the church was packed. Elena had come with her 3 children, as she did every week. But this time, as she entered, all eyes were on her. The woman in the front row stood up, her voice sharp as a knife. Pastor, we can't have a liar desecrating the sanctuary. She lives with McGraw as husband and wife, while her husband is still alive somewhere. A murmur arose. The pastor looked at Elena, then at Daniel, who was standing behind her. The air was as tense as a string. Elena felt her feet rooted to the wooden floor, wanting to scream, but her throat was choked. Lark held her mother's hand, tears in her eyes. Silas clenched his fist, and Boone buried his head in her mother's skirt. Elena could only whisper, I'm not lying. Jonas is dead, I swear to God. But her words fell on a heavy void. Daniel finally put his hand on her shoulder, pulling her gently. Let's go, he said softly, but firmly. She bowed her head, led her child away, leaving behind contemptuous looks. That night, the house was quiet. The children fell asleep after crying. Elena sat by the fire, her eyes red. Daniel approached, but she avoided his gaze. I will find a way to prove it, he said hoarsely. I will check the records. I will ask the pastor. I will find any papers. Elena shook her head, tears rolling down her face. And if I don't find any, will you believe me to be a liar? Daniel clenched his fists. He wanted to hold her, to say he trusted her with his life. But the fear of the past, the death of his ex-wife, the vicious rumors of the past, stopped him from speaking. Elena looked him straight in the eyes, angry for the first time. I've lost everything once, Daniel. I can't bear to lose your trust again. With that, she burst into tears and rushed out, leaving him standing silently in the flickering firelight. The next day, Evan appeared at the bar, bragging to the drinkers. Elena is Jonas's unmarried wife. She has no papers, which means she is not a widow. What she has at McGraw Farm should belong to the Hartfields. The crowd cheered. A few men nodded, and one winked. The price of silence must be high. The news reached Daniel. He sat quietly at the old wooden table, his eyes flashing with an anger Elena had never seen before. But when she entered, he just looked at her, saying nothing. That silence, once again, hurt more than 1,000 accusations. At night, Elena sat on the bed, holding her 2 children. Lark asked softly, Mama, they call us bastards, is that true? Elena bit her lip, her heart breaking. She stroked her children's hair, her voice choked. No, it's not your fault. You are Mama's only light. But as the night passed, Elena's heart was filled with only one question. Will Daniel have the courage to stand by her side? Or will he turn his back like everyone else? The first cold wind of winter swept through Roswell, swirling dust around the old wooden houses. The Silver Spur was packed, with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of tobacco and whiskey. On the bandstand, a red-haired girl strummed her banjo, but all eyes were on a table in the middle of the room. Evan Hartfield sat there, his feet propped up on a chair, his glass swinging, his voice booming. The whole town knows. Elena Hartfield is not a widow. Jonas has no death certificate. The other child is a bastard, and McGraw holds her like his wife. A disgrace in this holy land. The crowd murmured, some guffawed, some nodded. Every word was like a knife to the ears of those who still believed in honor. The door swung open. Daniel McGraw entered. The air froze. The music stopped. The noise died away. Only the clacking of heels could be heard. He walked straight, tall, broad-shouldered, his blue-gray eyes cold as steel. Evan curled his lips, throwing a challenging look. Oh, the main character is here to defend his lover, McGraw? Daniel stopped in the middle of the room. He did not draw his gun, did not shout. His voice was low and clear. I came to say at once, in front of everyone. Elena Hartfield is a widow. Jonas Hartfield died in a battle near El Paso. I have proof. He pulled an old envelope from his pocket and threw it on the table. It was from the county registrar's office, with a certificate from the army. Jonas Hartfield, killed in action, buried with the unit. A murmur arose. A few people approached, skimmed it, then nodded. Their eyes shifted from Evan to Daniel. Evan stood up, his face red. Fake papers. McGraw can bribe. You believe him, but not me? I am the blood of the Hartfield family. I have the right. Daniel took a step forward, the distance between them only half an arm's length. His voice was low but echoed throughout the room. Blood? Jonas's brother, yes. But since his death you left, didn't care for your widow, didn't raise your 3 children. Now you've come back just to plunder. Is that blood? Evan gritted his teeth, his hand hovering near the butt of his gun. The crowd held its breath. Daniel didn't draw his weapon, just placed his hand on his belt right where the gun was strapped, his eyes unblinking. If you want, I'll go out and settle this. But remember, you lied to this town, you insulted an innocent woman, and I won't forgive you again. The air was as tense as a bowstring. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then Evan lowered his hand, stepped back, stammering, No, I don't want bloodshed. I only tell the truth. But no one believed him. The crowd parted, casting contemptuous glances. A man whispered, if Jonas had lived, he would never have let his brother humiliate his wife like that. Evan angrily threw down his glass of wine, then walked out of the bar, his figure disappearing into the night. Daniel turned and looked around. He didn't smile or boast, just said briefly, a woman's honor is no joke. If anyone dares to call Elena Hartfield a liar, tell me straight. No one answered. There was only the creaking of chairs, the exhalation of breaths, and a silence as thick as the sentence hanging over the heads of those who had mocked her. Daniel nodded slightly, then turned away. Each step he took out of the pub was like a hammer slamming the door shut behind Evan. When Daniel returned to the camp, Elena was sitting on the porch, her eyes red from sleepless nights. He placed the envelope of confirmation paper in front of her. Sir, where did you find it? Her voice trembled. District office. Military records. I left yesterday. I didn't want to return empty-handed. Elena held the paper, tears welling up in her eyes. For years she had lived under the shadow of suspicion. Now this paper was not only proof, but also a release. Thank you. She choked, but Daniel shook his head. Don't thank me. I didn't do it out of obligation. I did it because I knew you were worth it. Elena looked at him, her heart pounding. Daniel's gaze was no longer a cold wall of ice, but a smoldering fire, ready to burn away all suspicion. In the following days, the town's attitude changed. People began nodding to Elena when they went to the market. A few women brought cakes, saying, for the children. The children were no longer chased away. But in Elena's heart there was still a question. Was Daniel doing this out of honor or out of love for her? One night, after the children were asleep, she walked to the fireplace and looked at him. "Why did you go so far to find papers for me? You didn't need to do that." Daniel looked up, his blue-gray eyes shining in the firelight. He stood up, moved closer, until the distance was only a breath. "Because I can't let them bury you in the mud. And because—" He stopped, his voice hoarse. "I can't bear to see you cry." Elena trembled. She didn't answer, only his hand gently touched her shoulder, warm and firm. In that moment, all the rumors, all the slander, all the hurt melted away. Only the truth remains. They need each other. The confrontation ended, but it left scars on both of their hearts. Daniel understood. Only actions can prove the heart. Elena understood. Love in the West is never about vows, but about surviving storms together. Outside, the sky gradually brightened. The light of dawn spread over the vast prairie. For the first time in years, Elena allowed herself to smile at the thought of tomorrow. And beside her, Daniel McGraw was also silent. But his eyes said it all. He would not let anyone or anything tear this family apart again. Winter passed, and spring began to blow across the New Mexico prairie. The grass was green on the hillsides, and wildflowers were dotted with bright yellow. The McGraw Ranch was no longer the cold home of a lonely man, but a warm home filled with the sound of children's laughter every morning. Elena stepped out onto the porch, her sleeves rolled up, flowers still on her cheeks. In the yard, Lark and Silas were chasing each other around the fence, and Boone was hobbling along with a bucket of water larger than his small body. Daniel stood near the stable, his tall figure, his hand raised to shield himself from the sun, his eyes watching the children with a faint but sincere smile. Elena watched the scene silently, her heart filled with a sense of peace she had never felt before. She remembered the first days when she had entered this place, trembling, carrying 3 children and despair. Now everything had changed, not by magic, but by the man's strong hand and silent heart. In the afternoon, Daniel suddenly pulled the long table out into the yard, setting up a few rows of wooden chairs. Neighbors from near and far brought cakes, cider, and even a hastily arranged bouquet of wildflowers. No one mentioned the past. There was only laughter, the sound of a fiddle, and the smell of food. As the sun set, Daniel sat down beside Elena, amidst the warm noise. He did not kneel, nor did he give her a ring. He just quietly held her hand, his voice hoarse but firm. "In this life, I only want a peaceful home. Elena, if you ever thought of cooking for a man for the rest of your life, I hope that man is me." Elena was stunned, her eyes filled with tears. Then she smiled, her hand clasping his. No answer was needed, because the answer was clear in her eyes. Yes. The children cheered, running to hug them both. In the midst of happy laughter, Daniel bent down, his large arms embracing all 4 of them. For the first time, he no longer felt alone, and Elena no longer felt lost. In the sky, the stars lit up one by one, spreading across the wild land. Under their light, a new family was formed, not by blood, but by choice, by love and faith tested by storms. And in the music and the laughter, Elena thought, this is the true magic of the Wild West. The story of Elena Hartfield and Daniel McGraw is more than just a love story in the borderlands. It is a testament to the power of courage, sacrifice, and faith. Elena, a widow pushed to the margins of society, did not collapse. She chose to stand tall, protecting her children with all her might. Daniel, a closed man, labeled cold-blooded, dared to break down the wall of loneliness to open his heart to a family that was not related by blood. They both carry scars in their hearts. Elena is loss, Daniel is guilt. But when they meet, those scars are no longer a burden but become the foundation for bonding. The lesson is, family is not just about blood, but where we choose to stand together in the storm. Honor is not about rumors, but about the actions we dare to take to protect the truth. And above all, love doesn't come through flowery vows, but through quiet moments when we dare to put others before our own pain. If you've ever felt small, if you've ever been wronged by life, if you've ever feared the slander, remember Elena and Daniel. Remember, if only one person believes in you, and you're brave enough to believe back any storm can pass. Because in the end, true love is not loud, but strong enough to rewrite fate.